Oops. Light went off. Excuse me.
Oh,
It's automatic,
oh,
the lights. Because we're not moving, so then it turns off. When your father first came back, do you know whether or not he found a job immediately?
I think he went and got a job, working in Buena Park. You know, why I sort of remember is, just before the war, in the late 30s, there was a farmer that my dad knew well, and he had financial hardship, so he came to see if he could borrow some money from my dad. And so when I asked my mother, maybe years later, I remember asking her, why did he come? Well, she said something like that my dad was sort of indebted to him because when he came back, I guess that might have been what you're asking, that he came back and that's where he worked for a while to get on his feet or find a place to start farming.
So you think that that man had helped him?
Mm-hmm. And so that's why that was the connection as to why he came looking for some money.
Okay, very good. When you were growing up before the war in this area, in the San Gabriel Valley, were all your friends Japanese Americans, or did you have a variety of different friends?
Yeah, I had a variety of. I had some Hamachi friends, and we visited back and forth. They would come over. I would go to their place. And when you're younger, I try to learn a lot of stuff because my dad wasn't a very good mechanic, but I was sort of interested in the machinery and stuff. So I would I got invited to go to George Marashig's auto garage, auto repair, and I'd take my lunch and my dad would drop me off on Saturdays. And when there wasn't too many things to do, I was able to watch them work, tune-ups and oil changes. But other times when they got busy, I was scraping the dirt off of the oil pan, scraping gaskets off of where they were stuck on with shellac, and so that's how I learned, by observation.
I see. How old were you at that time? About?
Maybe about 10 years old.
Oh.
It's unheard of, but that's the way I used to work on Model Ts and stuff at home at that time. And my dad bought me some socket wrenches, tools, so I could work on them. But on a Model T, Henry Ford usually had supplied enough tools that you could work on it. And if you had a pair of pliers and a screwdriver, in addition to what tools came with the Model T, that was sufficient.
I imagine working on a Model T is a lot easier than cars today.
Yeah.
So, did you have any African Americans or Mexican American friends?
No,
There were.
there weren't any in West Covina at that time.
And you got along with were there any other Asian Americans besides Japanese Americans?
Mm-hmm. When I was about eighth or ninth grade, I started taking Kendo. and still sort of small for my age. It was sort of like a runt, and I was the shortest person graduating in the 8th grade. But taking kendo and going to what they call meats or shiai. I learned how to eat. I think it was a half a pint, but it felt more like a pint of ice cream that all the other guys ate. They would put their money together, and we used to buy a whole bunch of ice cream to eat for lunch. And that's where I learned that you can really, if you're small, you can't eat that much ice cream. Had my fill.
How do you view yourself do you view yourself as Asian American, American, Japanese American?
I feel that the price that Niseis paid during the camp days, that I rather distinguish myself as Japanese American.
You have children?
Mm-hmm.
How many children do you have?
5.
5 children. And what is the breakdown? How many boys? How many girls?
2 girls, 3 boys.
And did the children, or how do you feel about, did they marry or like within the Japanese American, or did some of them marry outside of the Japanese American community?
Mm-hmm. I insisted that they all marry Japanese or Asian American, but my younger daughter married Hawaiian Filipino and Chinese. There was some Chinese also in the mother's side.
So it sort of fulfilled the requirement that you set down.
Yeah, but I just couldn't. I just couldn't say no, and my daughter was she was asked to go out with Hagujins, but I put a stop to that, and probably the one reason was that this discrimination that occurred during the war and stuff. And so after we came back and my family started, I was one of the volunteers for this center. I tried as much as I can to help out. And so at the center on Sunset and Service, I thought I had some ideas that, and I was sort of younger than the Hatakeyamas, Kiyans, Sogiokas, Taguchi, you name them all. They were about 10 years older than I was. But I pitched in later, and I kept helping, and I was the youngest farmer that they accepted that he's just a kid, but they took me fishing with them, wherever they had a function, I was there with them.
Okay. Well, talking about, since we've sort of transitioned to now, let's say after the war now. During the war, where was your family at? At what camp?
Oh, Hart Mountain, Wyoming.
Hart Mountain.
Mm-hmm.
I was told that during that time you became head of the family.
Mm-hmm.
Did your father pass away?
No. He was sort of influenced to go to the lake. All his some local farmers, kids that I went to school with, a lot of families from Bassett, West Covina went to the lake, and they did go to Japan, and so they had to join the army in Japan, you know, not the Japanese Army, but the U.S. Army, and worked your way back here.
So your parents were at Tule Lake and you were at Heart Mountain?
No,
How was that?
they wanted to go, and I objected.
You objected, okay.
Yeah, I told my dad, I was about 15, 16 then, and I told my dad, no, you guys go, I'll just leave me some blankets and my clothes, and I'll move into the bachelor's quarter. You know, they'll feed me at the mess hall anyway, so I'll be okay.
So your parents went to Tule Lake?
No, then
Actually,
they changed their mind.
oh, they changed their mind, okay.
Uh-huh. And did you know that during that time I was in camp, some of my dad's friends, you know, that he visited with in the same block, they came and says, how come you don't want to go? And, you know, they were trying to influence me to go with my parents to the lake, and I says, no, I don't think I want to go to Japan.
Yeah, because a lot of, if you went to Tule Lake, a lot of people who went to Tule Lake were people who were trying to go back to Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Or you were troublemakers.
Oh, they did go to Japan,
Right.
and had to come back the hard way.
Yeah.
And a lot of them starved, they tell me. You know, food was short.
Mm-hmm. So you knew that, and you
No, I didn't know that I didn't know that they suffered until they came back and told me that they had a hard time.
But you didn't want to go to Tule Lake because you didn't want to go back to you didn't want to go to Japan.
No.
That was your principal reason.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So then, so how was it then you were the head of the family? Because then you took charge at that point while you were in camp?
No, at that time my sister was there, and she was already over 21. She was born in 1920, so it was 7 years. So when I was about 17 or she was about 24 then. So she was more like the. Then my dad was, had wobbly legs, but he was okay yet. You know, my mother is 14 years younger than my dad.
So basically you just took charge, or were kind of in charge because you had a grasp language and you were more physically able.
Mm-hmm.
So you just became sort of the spokesperson for the family.
Well, they depended on me a little bit. Just after war started, there was stories that we were going to have to go to Manzanar, and so everybody they didn't have trucks, bought trucks, you know, to get ready to haul their furnishings and stuff. But my parents took me to Azusa, and I took out a driver's license to help my dad, help him up driving to Manzanar. And so I was able to, drive and stuff before the war.
And you were only 14, 15
Yeah.
at that time.
Yeah, 14.
14.
Mm-hmm. And there were instances where at Shinenkai, the New Year's party, one time my dad drank too much, and so he couldn't come home. He had to rest, and it was raining, and we were at this good family friend's house, and I already slept, while they were partying, and so when it was time to go home, they woke me up, and I we all got in the car and I drove home
You drove home.
from Los Angeles. You know,
Oh, that was, in Los Angeles at that time wasn't that close because there were no freeways.
I know, but still, you know, I used to help my dad unload produce, and so we used to go to Los Angeles almost every night, you know, when we had the produce to haul.
Oh, so you're quite familiar then with the route and
Mhm.
everything. Can you, can you give me your recollections of what it was like to come back to the St. Gabriel Valley after the war? Oh, I'm assuming that you came back after camp. You came back
Mhm.
here.
Just prior to World War II, or around 1939, we moved to this property on where the Fashion Plaza is in West Covina.
Mhm.
And my dad had leased 9 acres of ground, and then he went and he bought through friends and people he knew. He bought a home from a Japanese, and he bought a garage from Temple City, and we had relocated, those buildings were relocated on this 9 acres of property. And
So your father bought a house and bought a garage and then put it on this leased
yeah,
land.
leased ground.
Okay.
So that was sort of home again, you know, because we had property, and the people that were the landlord was German people, and this family by the name of Kranz, the mother owned, his mother owned a property, but he was my school in West Covina before war. He was the principal. He was the 7th and 8th grade teacher. He was the bus driver. He was the coach. You know, he was everybody. And we had only 3 classrooms, and 8 grades were in the 3 classrooms. So he was very cordial during the camp time. When we had some stuff like tools or whatever we needed, I would write a letter, you know, requesting some stuff, and he would mail it to Wyoming for me. So anyway, I came back, and I was greeted by this the lady, you know, the landlord's wife, and I borrowed a bicycle, and I went to see my friend named Frank Jackley near the West Covina Grammar School, and he wasn't very friendly when I went back to see him. You know, that first day I went to West Covina, I borrowed a bike and I went to visit him. He and then all, and he sort of shied away from me and saying that, oh, I don't think I want to be friends with you or something. And so I found out right away that people weren't friendly. And in West Covina, they got together before the Japanese started coming back, and they sort of voted not to allow us to come back. And even though they said that this Mr. and Mrs. Kranz, you know, they overlooked that, and they welcomed me, you know, back over here. But we became, as we farmed, and you know, we were the lessor. Let's see, but I later on, when the leases were up from the people that were farming, I became the what you call it? I leased the ground, and I became you know, the farmer.
So your house when you came back? You had your house when you came back?
But it was occupied, you know, with a tenant that was living there, was also farming that piece of ground. So he had a lease, and then until the lease was up, he was able to stay and keep farming. But we worked for this farmer, you know, he was Chinese, and
So a Chinese family leased the land, moved into your house during the war, and then farmed the property. And then when you came back, well, you had to wait until their lease was over, and
Correct.
then you were able to get the land, lease the land, and get your house back. How long did it take? How long was before his lease ran out?
Well, I think we started farming around January of 1947. In the 2 years, well, we came back late 45. I came around September of 1945 from Hard Mountain, and I started working pretty quick. And my mom and dad and the two brothers came around November. They were almost the last to leave. So I was working, and
Where did you guys stay for those 2 years before?
in the garage.
Oh, you lived in the garage of
Mhm.
the garage that your father had bought
Uh-huh.
and moved there?
Yeah, the garage had an attic, you know, attic area, a loft they call it, and you couldn't stand up and straight until unless you were right in the peak.
Uh-huh.
But the rest of it, you had to hunch over, and that was my room before the war. I lived on top of the garage.
But that's where you and your parents and your brothers lived
Yeah,
after
well-
when you came back?
Well, then later on, my dad couldn't get up and down too easy, so the farmer that was leasing, the one we were working for, we built a 10 by 30 room. You know, we partitioned it with drywall and concrete, you know, create concrete floor, and that's where my mom and dad stayed.
How do you express how life was for you after the war? Was it, can you describe the conditions you think?
Well, I was young. And I was cooped up, you know, more or less. You know, in camp you couldn't go anywhere. But in 1945 I was 18 yet. So I don't think there were times of hardship when I was working, but I was eager to go play also. And so what we did was a group of us used to go on Saturday, because if you're farm labor, that was your day off, not Sunday. You had to work on Sunday. But we went to see movies, you know, we used to go to dances. And we used to share rides. You know, we would at least have four people in a car when we went to get together on a Saturday.
So you felt because you were younger, then it was more like an adventure for you?
Mm-hmm.
So you didn't feel the hardship as much as maybe like your parents did?
No. I was ready to go play, but I worked to earn the money, and I remember treating the guys to go to a movie. They didn't have much money, and like if you go to the movie, they would wait in the back of the line until everybody bought their own tickets, and then the guy sometime didn't have enough money, and we would loan him money or buy it for him.
Okay, so then you came back, you were working, helping your parents. When did you start to get your own property and start your own farming business? About what time? What year?
Oh, the lease ran out, I guess, at the end of 1946. So in January of 47, we started farming.
That's with your parents, with your father.
My mother, father, the two brothers were still going to high school and grammar school.
But when did you go out on your own? Or did you always just work with
No,
the
I
farm?
worked with my mother and father. My dad was sort of handicapped. He had this in Japan now. If my friend's family, they have from Fukuoka, in that one place where my dad is from. It's called Motoka, and they marry cousins. So if there's a genetic disease or something, or a bad gene or something, they would not have good balance. And my dad had bad calves, like he couldn't walk good. He looked like he was, inebriated.
Mm.
But I could see that in family friends that were from the same place. This Nishijima family that my dad was good friends with. One of the daughters was Gypsy.
Had
Yeah.
the same kind of problem.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because of genetic problems.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When did you meet your wife? What year was that?
19 about 50 or 51, around there.
And when were you married?
54.
54. Okay. Oh, so you were married 60 years now?
60 years.
Celebrating, you celebrated your 60th anniversary, or you will be celebrating?
No, we already celebrated.
Okay. Very
We
nice.
didn't do too much, but so we've been lucky. Things went pretty good for us, and we have 10 grandchildren,
Mhm.
and we have some scholars in the 10 grandchildren. I didn't have. I had to help my brothers and sisters and even my oldest sister buy a house and stuff. But I didn't get a chance to have an education, so I helped my kids, but then I didn't have, a lot of money in education. Didn't cost that much when my kids went to school. But my oldest son got a scholarship, so he got one of the UC Regents scholarship at UC Berkeley.
Mm.
So he went from year to year as long as he kept his grades up. It was tuition free.
You're pretty covered. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
covered.
very good. So, what is your feelings about the United States from your experience through growing up here and going through the war and coming back? And what is your feelings? What are your feelings?
Well, your feelings change, like your feelings change. That I thought after camp that I really got. I think all the Japanese got really cheated. Cheated out of being a citizen, And before the redress ever came about, I used to think about